The Capricorn full moon is a time to think long term. Think about where you want to be 6 months from now by the winter solstice. Where do you want to be at the end of 2024? Work backwards from that version of yourself. What are the incremental steps to getting there? On a Capricorn full moon, this is your time to focus, really zero in on what are the ABCs, what are the one, two, threes, what are the basic steps that I have to take in order to reach the top of that mountain. Hey there, and welcome to the latest episode of my astrology podcast, Astrology Unbound. I'm Evan Nathaniel Grim, and today we're going to talk about both the summer solstice and the Capricorn full moon. This is going to be a major release point for you during the year where you are celebrating your accomplishments thus far, but also pruning and refining the things that you don't need anymore in order to excel and succeed over the next 6 months thereafter. Before I begin, I would invite you to subscribe to my newsletter. I provide guides for the lunation cycles, and that includes prompts and manifestation guides, guides for setting intentions, and I do one-on-one readings, which you can also go book, and I also offer courses through my website. You can access this all through evannathanielgrim.com. So, this week, we have a very pivotal transition going on. So every year, around June 20th, 21st, 22nd, depending on the exact point where the sun is at 0 degrees Cancer, we have the summer solstice. And the summer solstice is that point in the Northern Hemisphere where we have maximum daylight, and it's because the Earth is tilted on its rotational axis at 23.5 degrees. And at the summer solstice, the Earth is actually pointed towards the sun, to a point where the sun is passing directly over the Tropic of Cancer. And at that is at its maximum declination of 23 degrees, 27 minutes, by the way. And so when the sun is passing over the Tropic of Cancer and the Northern Hemisphere is seeing the utmost daylight that it can have during the year, this is symbolically marking that, it's actually literally marking the high point in, the sun's path, towards the north. And symbolically, though, if you think about the sun in, the astrological lore, it is rising and setting consistently every day, and therefore it does represent the spirit. And the sun, in a lot of ways, does map this hero's journey where, as we reach towards the summer solstice, the sun is trending northward, we're getting more daylight, and the light is illuminating our consciousness. It is giving us energy, vitality, and we're really like seeing we're seeing very clearly what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. And then as the sun trends southward after that, eventually we reach the fall equinox of equal day and night, but then it keeps going towards the south, and then it eventually reaches the Tropic of Capricorn. That's why we call it the tropical zodiac. And so upon the winter solstice, we have a point where the sun is at its southernmost point, and in the northern hemisphere, we have the greatest amount of night and the sort of minimal amount of day. So the winter solstice is that point where the sun appears to have, it appears to almost like be losing its light for good, but then it starts to shift and turn around. As it turns around, it symbolizes a rebirth, resurrection, and the winter solstice is a time to celebrate that reactivation of our selves, our identity, our energy, and it's like we've been broken down to our core essentials, just to the bones of something, and now we're ready to assemble and strive for a new goal, a new achievement. And so the summer solstice is cause for celebration, but it's also, there's a sense of a bittersweet energy of like, well, these are going to continue to be the warm summer days. However, the sun is going to be losing light henceforth over the next 6 months. So many cultures, of course, have celebrated the summer solstice in various ways. We have monuments all across the earth that are meant to align with the sun's rising at the solstice. And, usually, again, the solstice would be a time where you're celebrating what you've done so far this year and then you're refining. In this case, it is a clear culmination and release point because we also have a Capricorn full moon the following day. So during the summer solstice, I would actually recommend that you get out a journal and reflect on what you've accomplished since December 21st, 2023, when we had the winter solstice. And think about where you're tracking relative to maybe the goals that you set out at the beginning of the year or maybe during the winter solstice. What could have gone better? What are you feeling really content with, happy with? And, what do you want to where do you want to extend your gains and where do you want to shore up your losses and make adjustments? And, again, you can set out a new course for yourself or think about during this sort of waning hemicycle of the sun as it starts to decrease in light. Think about it like the second stage of a second half of a lunar cycle. So within the lunation cycle, it's like the moon builds up to its fullness, of course, and then it starts to wane. Here we have the sun at its peak amount of light in the Northern Hemisphere, and now it's going to lose light. So as it's losing light, I would argue you should really be, adding a little bit more precision to things you've already done. Of course, you can start fresh whenever we have, the next new moon, but also, again, this for you is a major release point because of that full moon the next day. And what's interesting about this full moon in Capricorn is that it's at 1 degree of Capricorn, which, naturally would be very close to a conjunction with that winter solstice point when the sun was at 0 Cap. And also Mercury was retrograde on the winter solstice last year at 1 degree of Cap. So the moon is showing you, really, it's highlighting where you're at right now, again, with, accomplishing your goals, but also anything you were reflecting on, conversations you were having December 21st last year. Some of those may be revisited or completed or concluded, or there's closure there. And what to me is really powerful about this full moon and very sobering, honestly, is that, it's ruled by Saturn, full moon in Capricorn, and Saturn is on the verge, very close to stationing retrograde. And in Pisces, the retrograde of Saturn in Pisces will be all about awakening to where your expectations are misguided or inflated, where you are buying into deception, where you are just not seeing something with clear eyes and where you're buying into this mirage. And so the full moon is the full embodiment of something in our lives. It's the illumination, it's the epiphany and the realization. And so anytime you have a Capricorn full moon, there can be this realization of like, what is the reality of my situation right now? Or am I on or off plan or on or off track right now? So, it definitely has that sort of sense of like becoming more aware of the limitations or becoming more aware of how you have to shift your professional strategy in something. And anytime we have Capricorn, we do think about our work and we think about our career prospects and things of that nature. And not only Saturn in Pisces, but by being in Pisces, it's ruled by both Jupiter and Neptune. And we have Jupiter in Gemini and Neptune in Pisces. So there is a sense that even though with this full moon, there's a dawning reality, there can be analysis paralysis because the ruling planets of Pisces are in discordant positions. So there's a bit of information overload with Jupiter and Gemini. So some people may kind of have a sense of what they want to release and let go of and purge, but they're not totally sure because they're getting conflicting information from within themselves and different opinions from their friends or their family. And so you ultimately kind of have to make that call yourself, right? Get a second opinion by all means and get feedback. But I think that you already probably know, for the most part, what you want to let go of. And some applications, let's get into that. Some applications and use cases on this full moon. This is a really opportune time to actually release any professional obligations or responsibilities that you no longer resonate with. So if I think about my own life in the summer of 2022, there's very commonly So the Capricorn full moon naturally would happen during Cancer season. So in the summer of 2022, in July, I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember that there was a Capricorn full moon at which I used to completely release myself from that sort of matrixy job that I had. So I was working at a marketing research company, digital strategy firm, and I've been there for 4 years. And increasingly was finding success with the astrology track I was on. I had a website, I was already doing readings, but I wasn't really in a position quite yet where I saw myself being able to take the leap and having the capital to do so. But I used that Capricorn full moon to kind of untether myself from that organization and close the loop on that and disconnect myself from their energy. Because anytime you work for an institution or a conglomerate, they own your time, technically. And think about Capricorn as time. When you're a salaried employee, the company owns your time, and energetically, you have an energetic contract with them. And they are siphoning energy away from you, and they are sort of molding you as they see fit. So even if you have your own independent life outside the firm or outside the company, like you are still have an energetic cord to them or an attachment to them because you need something from them, so to speak, or you see yourself as needing something from them. And so on a Capricorn full moon, it can really be actually a point of liberation for you. So if you are feeling as though you're at this job way past the expiration date and you feel like you've evolved so far beyond the position you're in, and your coworkers are saying, well, I'm just collecting a paycheck to sail off into my retirement, and they still have like 10 years to work. Or, if they're just not seeing their own potential, like this full moon would be a great time to get out of that environment and to tap into your full potential through doing something that you really want to do. But with Saturn and Pisces, there are some hard-hitting realities and lessons here, and karmic moments and sobering realizations about where you have maybe been living in a fantasy world at the same time. So for some of you, maybe that's not resonating with you. Maybe you're like, I got out of that job a long time ago, or I actually kind of love my job right now. Another moment here, another manifestation of this full moon could be that you feel as though there's a lot more work that you would have to do if you wanted to, let's say, become a director, and you realized, no, I don't really have the right camera equipment at this point. Or maybe I need to go to take a one-time class to close the skills gap. Or anything else that is impeding your growth or your path. Like the Capricorn full moon is a time to think long term. And right after the summer solstice, why not think about where you want to be 6 months from now by the winter solstice? Where do you want to be at the end of 2024? And work backwards from that version of yourself. Think about that version of yourself with having everything you want, everything that you're striving for coming true. What are the incremental steps to getting there? Not the quantum leaps. With the Capricorn full moon, we're not talking about like Aquarius or the energy of Uranus and just leapfrogging, skipping a bunch of steps. Like on a Capricorn full moon, this is your time to focus and really zero in on what are the ABCs, what are the 1, 2, 3s, what are the basic steps that I have to take in order to reach the top of that mountain. And, with Saturn in Pisces, if you dedicate towards a clear process and you structure a plan, you can achieve Piscean things, which are so divinely beautiful and inspiring and pushing us all towards maybe greater unity consciousness, or making us all believe that there is some purpose to this existence. I mean, and I know I'm kind of getting into grandiose territory there, but that's really what Pisces is all about. It's like not succumbing to nihilism or an existential crisis, like feeling like, okay, there's something that I can accomplish and bring into the world that heals me and heals the people around me and makes them believe that they can tap into their full potential as well. So that's the magic. There's a magical quality to Pisces. So what are the changes that you need to institute now in order to capture and create magic? for yourself and the world around you. Now, on the full moon, we also have, we have a number of planets. We have 3 planets in Cancer, or celestial bodies: the Sun, Venus, and Mercury. And Cancer is very much about building that safety net, building that comfort zone, feeling like you are very comfortable with your home, your family, your property, and you are nurturing a relationship maybe with Venus in Cancer. So, on this full moon, you may realize that you want to dedicate more time to your family. You may realize that you want to focus on relationships that you already have in your life. Cancer is not really looking outward, it's a little bit more about sustaining and nurturing what it already has. So, this is a time to replenish, restore, rejuvenate existing connections and relationships. With Mercury in Cancer, you are also maybe a little bit nostalgic, thinking about the past, thinking about, with the summer solstice energy, being reflective about the past 6 months. And it could be a creative time with this much water in the sky, Cancer and Pisces combined. And then with the South Node continuing to be in Libra, of course, that doubles down on the idea that you could revisit some relationships that are connected to your family, or, relationships with people who, feel like family that you've always been able to rely on. Now, Jupiter still being in Gemini in the first decan, a decan that is, the purest form of Gemini, and, very insatiably curious. For some of you, the realization maybe that you want to shift your professional track. There's plenty of learning opportunities here with Jupiter and Gemini. So picking up, go to the bookstore. I talked about this on episode 1 of the podcast. Like, go to your favorite bookstore and just see where your intuition leads you. What aisle do you go down? Doesn't have to be a book or a topic that you're familiar with. Just like what are you feeling right now? And open that book and just see if it resonates. And maybe that opens a new mindset for you. Or maybe you take a class, you do something to stimulate the mind in a different way to find an alternative route. We also have Mars and Taurus. And Mars and Taurus is a little bit disruptive in the sense that, first of all, Mars is in its detriment here. Typically, it's comfortable in Scorpio and Aries. Those are its ruling signs. So when it's in its detriment, a little bit less comfortable. But what makes it kind of interesting and maybe a little volatile is that it is trending towards a conjunction with Uranus July 15th. But I think we're going to start to feel that energy building now by June 21st. So with Mars nearing that conjunction over the next few weeks after this, we have revolutionary attitudes seeping into the collective. We have, a sense of the status quo being ineffective, inefficient, unsatisfactory. Why not change the whole thing? So there's a frantic energy in the collective. And also, maybe it's because there is a loss of faith, which has been ongoing, of course, but a loss of faith in the mainstream media, a loss of faith in, the people that we've elected, questioning why are we giving these people validation at the voting booth? Like, maybe there are better representatives, people who actually can understand our everyday concerns. And what I also want to add in, with Saturn being in Pisces, pretty close, 10 degrees away from Neptune, is that there may be some realizations about our healthcare system at this point that are impossible to ignore. And of course, it's very obvious where and how and why the healthcare system is broken. But I think there's more widespread vocalization maybe of these concerns, whether it's healthcare costs, the cost of pharmaceuticals, the way that recommendations are made for how we take care of ourselves. How can we ensure that we are living healthier lives? And how does the system, how does the healthcare system either, like, is it actually driving optimal outcomes? Or are we sort of in a sick dependence on it, in the sense that it keeps us in a revolving door of like always being slightly not healthy? So the reason I'm bringing this up is because, and like, maybe it's not making headlines on the full moon, maybe it's not showing up right away, but I guarantee you the Saturn Neptune conjunction a year from now, and then heading all the way into early 2026, that is absolutely the disassembly and dismantling of core components of our healthcare system as we know it today, because the system as it's built right now is not sustainable, which is, for a number of reasons, which I won't get into on this episode. But from an astrological lens, Neptune is the planet that deals with healing, health, sickness, and Saturn is structures, institutions, so hospitals. And Saturn and Neptune aspects speak to healthcare. So the way healthcare is administered, the way advice is given, it's all being challenged now. Because even with Pluto being in Aquarius retrograde, it's like we are rethinking again and remodeling and remolding that status quo and the standard procedure of things, and saying, now that I have access to a wider network of information, the internet, social media, like the information highway, alternative media, it's like, oh, now I'm getting sort of validation that my experiences with the healthcare system are shared widely by many people on social media. Or I've always wondered the same thing about, again, is there a more naturalistic way to take care of myself? And of course, this has been front and center in the past few years with the pandemic. And now, with all the recent Gemini transits squaring Pisces, we've even seen in Congress sort of the investigation of how our agencies within the federal government, within the healthcare system, what was the methodology or decision criteria for executing on certain plans collectively. And we're seeing how, even through that perspective, profit motives skew the sort of purity, or they disrupt or denigrate almost the purity of the intentions behind something. So, like, thinking about either profit or competing priorities or bloated institutions getting in the way of making the correct decision. Even like, the pride of just wanting to like stick with the decision that the government made. But all these things are being scrutinized increasingly. And I even think that's implicated in this full moon. Realizing how, again, the decision-making process is compromised by all these factors. And what are the deleterious effects on the society that is receiving these recommendations? So there are cracks in the armor of the expert class. And that is something that's been ongoing throughout many industries. But I do think that the expert class within the healthcare system, they cannot outrun the crystal clear factual information that keeps flooding in every day through social media, through the alternative media sources. So regardless of where you stand on how to take care of yourself, whether or not you trust healthcare experts, like astrologically, you just do the math on it. And to me, it's pretty clear that the existing system is going to be called into question, even just from an economic standpoint, an economic viability standpoint. With Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, to distill this down, this is also about taking care of your own personal health. So regardless of what you think about that broader topic, really scrutinizing, your, like, what type of food are you buying? Are you keeping the sort of body, the temple nourished through natural ingredients? Or, because with Saturn and Neptune here, I do think we're realizing how modern supply chains, again, for the sake of efficiency and profit, while it could make sense on paper, it can have negative corrosive effects on our personal health. So I think that just personal health choices are really coming to the foreground at this time. But also think back to what I've said before. If that's not a concern, because everyone listening to this episode, you're going to have different circumstances in your life right now. So for some of you, maybe it's more about making the job change. For some of you, maybe it is about taking ownership of your health and looking into, how does my environment or even the people around me, how do they contribute to my health choices? Maybe you do want to look into how the healthcare system operates. Maybe you want to look into what is my healthcare plan right now. And also there's a sense there of what do I need to do with Saturn and Pisces to commit to a stronger path towards healing? And that could be mind, body, or soul. Anything in that triumvirate. It doesn't have to be just physical health. It's like Saturn and Pisces, maybe I need to adopt a new spiritual practice to feel, like I do have that sense of purpose or connection to the collective or to a divine power. And, the Capricorn full moon really to me is something that hopefully after this full moon, you're not wasting time on things that are not contributing to a really strong future. Because the gift of Capricorn is that the Capricorn can think long term. So really focus on what does the top of my mountain look like? What does the end of my 2024 look like? And what are the sacrifices I have to make to get there? So like a no limits mindset is absolutely fantastic. But you also have to operate within the confines of the notion of, okay, I have to make a commitment because anytime I commit to something, there is an opportunity cost. I'm taking time away from something else. So work with gravity a little bit here. You absolutely, aim high, fly to the moon, whatever you want to do with your life. Do that. But with Capricorn, it's like realism, realistic. It's practical. It's like, where do I cut my losses? Where do I extend my gains? So on this Capricorn full moon, don't judge yourself too harshly also, though, because Capricorn can be very judgmental. If a sobering reality comes through, yes, accept it, acknowledge it, but don't, sort of mire yourself in that sort of feeling of heaviness of like, woe is me, or pessimism. Like that's the shadow side of Capricorn that we don't want here. About being honest with yourself, saying, if I don't make this change today, whether it's with my health or my job, or maybe it's my relationship or something, then I will not, I will not be satisfied and I will not be successful in the way that I measure that success by the end of the year. So again, really expect to manifest. You could manifest something very powerful here, though. If you are, because sometimes full moons are not endings. Sometimes they are, it's the completion and the embodiment of something. So for some of you, you could even just put a fine point on a professional project that you've been working on. Or, you could, solidify something, formalize it, structure it, and establish that, and really hit your stride in a way that can sustain itself throughout the rest of the year with some incremental refinements. Also, I just want to mention that if you want that sort of sign by sign delineation of what the impact would be for you, including actual sort of guidelines, parameters, and prompts according to your sun, moon, and rising sign, I offer those in my newsletter. So my Substack, always I include intention guides, manifestation guides for each new and full moon. And so for this one, I list out the powerful release that you're going through based on your big three. And also where you can illuminate and manifest and fully embody something that actually you've been working on since the beginning of the year, back when we had the Capricorn new moon. So I want to thank you for tuning into this episode. Please subscribe, follow the podcast, give it a rating and a review. We would really appreciate that. It really helps to get the podcast out to more people. And I really feel like I have a role to play in the astrology podcast world and giving my own sort of, practical and useful and applicable take on astrology. So I really appreciate your support. And, I have courses, readings available as well through evannathanielgrim.com. And also, give me a follow on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram in addition to my Substack. So I'm Evan Nathaniel Grim. This is Astrology Unbound, and I'll see you at the next episode.